Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from theniche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sports. Got some big yarns live on the website right now. Big, hefty Flying Kiwis wrap-up of all the Kiwi footballers around the world. And, of course, lots of NRL for ya. We got a Warriors versus Panthers written preview, got the Kiwi-NRL wrap-up as well of all the finals action, got a whole lot of Kiwi-NRL spotlights on Warriors players, and of course tomorrow I'll be publishing the NRLW preview for this round of action as well. Hopefully have some cricket updates on the website as well coming up, and you working on anything else for our website, the niche-case.com, Nico the Wildcard?
All Blacks World Cup roundup. That's certainly coming along. That's mostly written at this point, so that'll be out hopefully later today, say around the same time as this podcast. Top of that, I got a few ideas that are deeper into the mix. Like there will definitely be a Wellington Phoenix women's update on how their off season is going at some point, and National League previews, men's and women's. Probably looking more like next week on those ones, but those are certainly on the horizon.
Beauty. And
Breakers
tomorrow...
preview as well. I forgot
Breakers. Breakers. Hoping for a... there are sprouts of a bit of a Kiwi vibe there with the Breakers that I am interested in.
Yeah.
Always good to see.
Which will certainly be part of that preview.
Always good to see a couple of Kiwi lads in the Breakers, isn't it? At least they're trying. Shout out to everyone who supports the Niche Case via Patreon. Big up all the Patreon whānau. You can sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/our Niche Case, our Niche Case. That link is in all the descriptions. Great place, easy to support the Niche Case straight up the guts directly. And of course, we drop our subscriber podcast for the Patreon whānau every Tuesday. And tomorrow is Friday, which means we send out our newsletter via Substack that comes out every Monday and Friday evening, full of Aotearoa sporting notes, nuggets, information, anything that doesn't quite fit into the big deep dives that we do for the website. So, for example, there's a UFC card coming up this weekend with a couple of Kiwi lads. I don't have time or space to do a deep dive for the website, so I'll probably just drop some notes for it in the email newsletter coming out tomorrow. You can sign up to that via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Each of us write stuff just for that email newsletter, as well as all the links to our big yarns on the website and all the podcast information. And if you like all of that, if you really enjoy that email newsletter, or you're listening to this and you don't want to sign up to Patreon to support us straight up the guts, you can explore the paid Substack option as well, which is very helpful, as well as the Patreon subscribers, very helpful in funding and keeping the Niche Case rocking and rolling. And of course, that subscriber podcast is also sent out to our paid Substack subscribers. So we got the website, the niche-case.com. We have the Patreon whānau, and we also have the paid Substack subscription as ways you can help the Niche Case out. And they have extra podcasts. You can also sign up to our newsletter that comes out every Monday and Friday, and you can also just be a nice person and smile at someone else today. Big up yourself, love yourself. Let's check in with some mindfulness.
Common courtesy today of the great man, Mr. Leonard Cohen. 3 simple words. Success is survival.
If you survive, you're successful, I guess.
Just keep going,
Just
for
keep
all the
going.
challenges and all the hurdles and whatever, just keep going. That alone is success.
It is buzzy, like when you're in a tough spot, if you can just like make it to tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes today.
Like, sometimes it's even like, let's just get through this hour.
Yeah, but the sun's always going to rise tomorrow. It's always, the sun doesn't disappear, and that's a new day. It's a new opportunity for you to do your best. And if you're out here grinding, you're battling the dark arts, you're battling the darkness and the demons, the sun will rise tomorrow, and you will survive, and you will be successful. NRL footy is now in finals mode. So we're dealing with 8 survivors. We're dealing with 8 successful NRL teams, varying degrees of successful, because crikey Jack, The Warriors face the Panthers, and the Panthers, like, it just seems like everyone else isn't successful compared to the Panthers. Because I did my deep dive into the Warriors versus Panthers preview. Also got the Kiwi-NRL preview, so on top of all the Kiwi-NRL lads and finals footy as well. But we'll just start here with the Warriors versus Panthers. And the Panthers, they are really good at rugby league, funnily enough. They do the rugby league thing the best. They are first for set completion. They are first for post-contact meters, second for tackle breaks, first for run meters, and first for kick return meters. So you know what we're saying, like during that grind of Warriors games against Seagulls, Tigers, Dragons, and whatnot. And I kept saying, like, those teams weren't very good with the old kick return meters. So you can kind of pin them down their end of the field. Good kicking game from Sean Johnson, win the early tackles, dominate field position, and eventually grind those opponents down into the ground, which is exactly what they did. The Panthers are first for kick return meters, and they're also first for set completion. And this goes back into the idea I've brought up plenty of times this season, that the Warriors are pretty similar to the Panthers. They're similar in how they play their footy. They are similar in how they operate. They are similar in how their clubs and pipelines and all that are structured. But they're not as good as the Panthers. So it's like a second tier type of Panthers outfit, because the Warriors want to complete their sets, but I think they're like 4th or 5th for set completion. They're 6th for set completion. They're 9th for post-contact meters, 6th for kick return meters. So the Warriors are really good, and they're pretty decent at all stats except for offloads. They're not going to offload the footy very much because they're 17th for offloads. So it's like the Warriors and Andrew Webster. Obviously, Andrew Webster's got the Panthers connections and so on. But it's like they're a mediocre version of the Panthers. And we know the Warriors are good this year. We know the Warriors have been very fun, exciting, just interesting, I'd say, and intriguing, fascinating at how they play their rugby league, how the system is established under the two Andys, Andrew McFadden and Andrew Webster. Ultimately, though, coming into this finals game, like, they just don't do the Panthers things as well as the Panthers. And that, while I'm hopeful that and we'll get into how they might be able to break down the Panthers, but as an overarching kind of theme, they're just like Panthers light.
Yeah, Panthers light was exactly the phrase that was going through my head when you're describing that. It's like the I don't know, the low carb version of what the Panthers do. And it's obvious why that is. Like you pointed out, the coaching thing. And if you're going to mimic the style of a team, you mimic the style of the most successful team, and you find your own little like flavors and touches to put upon it, which the Warriors have done quite nicely. But I don't know how you then go and beat the team that you like. That's the thing, because I've talked to a few Warriors fans throughout the week, because everyone's buzzing and talking about how, you know, finals game coming up and whatever, and the hype is there. The hype is real. There's a lot of hope and expectation, but I just can't bring myself to think about how exactly they beat the Panthers. Which, I mean, they've got two lives, right? Like, they can lose to the Panthers, it's fine. Someone told me yesterday, like, you know, the Warriors just lose close to the Panthers, that'll be fine. Like, that'll be good. But if they beat them, they're going to have to play them again at some point, and then they'll come back around and smoke them the second time around. Like, even yeah, even thinking they can beat them, you might have to beat them twice. So that's an issue. The Panthers are just so good, though. Like, they're the way they built their team up with a lot of homegrown players and bringing them through with these combinations that were already settled. And then, you know, they made the grand final 3 years ago. They lost the first one, made it back to the next two since as well. They won those ones. It's like, that's the pathway to becoming a bit of a dynasty, is like you have that breakout, and then you have that one where you're close but not quite there, and then you actually go the next step, and then you just maintain that year after year after year. They're so good. And I don't really see how the Warriors beat them in this game, but I also think, like, it's finals footy, so whatever you think going into it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And also B, they don't have to beat them. You put up a credible performance against a team like that, you're still going to, whatever happens, you're still going to get a game at Mount Smart, probably at Mount Smart, coming up afterwards. Like there will be a home finals game, whether it's next week against one of the bottom, like one of the 5 through 8 teams, or whether it's in 2 weeks' time in a preliminary final. They're getting a home game. That's the one that everyone's sort of buzzing about. And this is sort of, in a way, it's probably not the way that a team should be thinking about it going into it. But in a way, it maybe as a fan, it might suit a little bit more. It's kind of a free hit for the Warriors, It's a bit like when the Tall Blacks played USA at the start of their thing. It's like whatever you achieve here is going to be a positive, like a net gain. But if you lose, you've lost nothing, because it's just the best team doing what they're supposed to do and winning.
Sort of. Like, I appreciate the
sentiment. Sort of, because it's still a finals game, and you can't throw away a finals game.
Well, I just think it's kind of defeatist to already put it off to next week, and especially I don't want to hold you too strictly to your Tall Blacks versus USA example, but
that was a more extreme version. Yeah,
the Tall Blacks are they're not in turmoil like the Bulldogs. But they're more like a team like the Bulldogs or the Sea Eagles or the Tigers or the Dragons in the context of the Tall Blacks in the World Cup compared to the NRL. The Warriors are, to continue that kind of example, metaphor, they're a Slovenia, they're in Australia, they're a Canada type of team in the NRL. They should be gunning for the win, and obviously they will be. Again, the team perspective is they want to win, and my fan pundit perspective is just focus on this game. Like, next week doesn't matter, the next home game doesn't matter, because at some point you need to defeat these teams to win a championship. And the Warriors, they need to show a few things, because to be honest, that middle stage of the season when they came up against the Panthers, they had a couple of, I think they lost to the Roosters and the Storm. Like, that's the ceiling for the Warriors. The Warriors aren't one of the best teams in the NRL. The Warriors are like a 3rd or 4th team in the NRL right now. And they don't have the performances against the very best teams. They also lost to the Broncos. They lost to a B team Broncos, which was a very good team in Napier. So they haven't put those performances up against the best teams to then come into this game and be like, let's try it and let's chalk it up and just see what happens after that. Because you might lose this one, you might lose the next one, and it's all over and you're wondering like what happened. And I think what the Warriors need to do is show, it's okay if they lose, but show some different signs. But ideally you want to see them really challenge the Panthers, and how they do that is going to be very interesting, because the Panthers, they're the only team who have scored conceded less than 400 points this season. They have conceded 312 points. Every other NRL team has conceded over 400 points. So how do the Warriors score? 20 points is too high. I wrote in my preview 10 points. They need to score at least 10 points to win this game. And how do they do that? That's going to be very interesting. And if they can't do it this week against the Panthers, I don't think they'll ever be able to do it in the rest of the finals. Like, if you're coming up against the Broncos or the Storm or any of these other teams, it's going to look a whole lot better if you were gained confidence from what you're trying to do against the Panthers. And I think there are some aspects of this game that the Warriors can challenge the Panthers. I think they are one of the best passing teams in the NRL, and that's going to be very interesting coming up against the Panthers. The Panthers do like to do their own passing. Obviously, Isaiah Yeo and Tohu Harris, I think, cancel each other out. Like, they play the same role to the same quality. No Australian talks about Tohu Harris in the Isaiah Yeo position, and they always just go to Cameron Murray as if Tohu Harris doesn't exist, but Tohu Harris is as good as Isaiah Yeo in the same position. Obviously, he's from New Zealand, so I think he's better. And you've also got like Adam Fanua-Blake has the same passing as Fisher Harris. I think Moses Leota is better than Mitchell Barnett, but it's the same kind of prototype of middle forwards in those teams. And I think the passing and the mobility on the bench is going to be interesting because you've got Dylan Walker, you've got Jazz Tavanga, Bailey Sirenen, and Josh Curran. None of those players are big boppers. And the Panthers, like Lindsay Smith's pretty big, Spencer Leniu is a psycho, Zach Hosking is more of a second rower, but he's a big unit as well. The Warriors bench and the Warriors forward pack is smaller and it's faster. So if you combine their passing with that agility, mobility, nimbility, is that a word? Nimbleness?
Nimbility? I don't know.
Nimbility. They are nimble, they are agile, and they are mobile. And I think that's going to be helpful in chasing the Panthers around. I don't know how helpful it's going to be in like getting shoulders into Moses Leota and Spencer Leniu and those characters, but it will be interesting. And the other thing I was pondering was I'm a big fan of the short-siders. They're a emerging group from the slums of Shaolin, the short-siders with a Z. Because Tamaita Martin loves the short side, and he is a short-sider. And when you think about like breaking down the Panthers and challenging the Panthers defense, we all know the Warriors shape, right? You've seen it yourself as a Dragons fan. We've talked about it. Bit of Dylan Walker passing to Tohu Harris, Adam Fanua-Blake passing to Sean Johnson, Niokore decoy passing out the back to Nickel Clockstar, Watane Zelezniak hat-trick, or Nickel Clockstar decoy, Johnson to Berry to flick to Watane Zelezniak hat-trick. Like all those attacking shapes we've seen all season, it's been like those are the like frequent hallmarks of Warriors attack. What we haven't seen as much of is Tamaita Martin owning a short side. And I don't think NRL teams, I think that's a clear indicator of a good NRL team is how often they attack short sides and like consistently hammer those short sides. If you attack a short side and defenders are out of position, or you've only got one marker, or you've got no markers, or you've got suddenly you've got a prop defending at center because he's covering the short side, you got to hit that short side again and again and again and force repeat efforts and make the most of it. I don't think a lot of NRL teams are that ruthless and that precise with attacking their short sides. But Tamaita Martin loves a short side. He loves 4-on-4. He loves 3-on-3. And if that's handled on the left side of the field, it's a threat by itself, but it also opens up everything else. So you need that balance. You need that big open shift to the right edge. And if you've got that big shift on to the right edge and you've got 3-on-3 on the short side with Tamaita Martin, you can kind of fake the big shift, go Tamaita Martin on the left. And I think Tamaita Martin, that is a strength of his game where Luke Metcalf's strength was he's fast. Like, I don't think Metcalf is as good at counting numbers, reading the play, and executing the right pass as Tamaita Martin. And I think Tamaita Martin's inclusion on that left edge and the balance it gives the Warriors' attack could be a major factor in breaking down the Panthers' defense.
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I don't know that was necessarily at the point at which Martin got injured. It's probably, it was clear it was him and Johnson with the halves, but Metcalf did some nice things in his time there, and I don't know that it was like obviously they always had the plan to bring Martin back in because you see him get I think he got a New South Wales Cup game, didn't he? And then he played last week in a sort of backup 11, get his reps up, backup 11, backup 13. Showing my biases
second 11 Warriors.
Second 11. That's the Blackcaps in the UAE version of the Warriors. And yeah, like, so that was clearly the plan. But I mean, there would have been a little bit of thought at least because Metcalf, it's not just that like he's not as good of a player as Tamati Martin. Of course, he's not. Like, he doesn't have the same experience, and certainly isn't as sort of intricate and skillful as Martin is. And as you, like your point about the counting numbers and just the little technical aspects of it, like. But Martin does have a punch, like a direct running sort of thing. He can go quickly through a hole, which does give them a little bit of a different.
You mean Metcalf?
That Metcalf. Sorry, I was just realizing I said the wrong name as you jumped in there. Metcalf gives them a little bit of a different element to their attack, but I'm not sure which one of those would be better against the Panthers. It probably is. If you're looking at the best defensive team in the league, there probably won't be many holes to run through anyway. So probably it wasn't necessarily other than saying shout out to Luke Metcalf for being a promising player who did some nice things. You probably need that more experienced head who can break down more of a set defensive line. In that case, it's a timely return.
Metcalf's also injured, so it wasn't a choice.
Oh well, there you go. So it wasn't an
on the back of our
also timely.
On the back of our in the subscriber podcast earlier in the week, we had a giggle about Ewan Aitken winning the Simon Mannering Award last season for the Warriors, joining the illustrious company of Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Tohu Harris, Sean Johnson, and so on. That was followed by Luke Metcalf going to the finals kind of media hype thing. So all the
probably because he's injured.
Yeah, so all the captains are there, and then there's like Luke Metcalf who respect to him.
So he's going to play.
he's not playing, and he's also, in my opinion, like a depth half right now. So it's I just had a funny little moment with that, but that's the Martin angle. Obviously, Sean Johnson, his kicking game is going to be important. Like every player's important in this game. I want to bring it up again. Like Rocco Berry tackling is going to be really interesting. I think he will be marking up against Isaac Tangor. And as I've said before, like none of the stats from the game against the Dolphins were very good. Like everyone missed tackles, everyone kind of sucked, as well as that was a major footy gods performance. Like the footy gods were not in favor of the Warriors, and it just to be honest, it sucked to watch, other than watching Keilani do his thing. But Rocco Berry said it so many times, he's a vacuum. If you get close to him, he's wrapping you up. And I think there's a lot of good centers in the NRL. I don't know if there's a lot of great tackling centers. And I think Rocco Berry is a great tackling center, and that's going to be helpful, especially because you don't have Jerome Luai on that left edge. So Jack Cogger is not as much of a running threat, and that might slow down their left edge a bit and allow Rocco Berry to dominate Isaac Tangor. And like Scott Sorensen, Kiwis International, he'll play that left edge role for the Panthers. So Rocco Berry, I think the thing that I like about the Warriors is that their defense on both edges with Martin, because Martin is better defensively than Metcalf, straight up. Rocco Berry's a good defender. I think Pompey's good enough, and especially if he's got Martin on his outside and Jackson Ford there. So the Warriors have good defense on both edges and good passing on both edges. We know a lot about the passing in the middle, Tohu Harris, Dylan Walker, Adam Whanu-Blake. But I said it earlier in the season, Berry and Pompey have the one-handed flick to the winger. They got quick hands to the winger. And when you combine, Nickel Clockstar is going to pop up on the right edge with his quick hands and running game. And then you've got Martin doing that on the left edge. So I think as far as challenging the Panthers, the Warriors can challenge them on both edges, but they can also make a few big defensive plays on both edges, which I think is going to be really important as well.
And it also definitely feels like one of those games where the Warriors will need to be close to their maximum capacity to beat a Panthers team. But if you do that, and you can't, like, if you do serve up something close to 100% of what they're capable of, and they've had games like that this season. It's not like it's something that we haven't seen from them. Haven't had games like that, as you say, haven't had games like that against the best teams. But I mean, it's finals footy. Like you're getting up for it. This is the time. This is the thing you've been playing for, is to get a game like this. Test yourself against the best when it matters most, kind of thing. The Panthers don't have one of their starting halves, so it's a very, very important part of how they play. Like there is, and it is week one as well, so there is also that thing for a team that's, in the Panthers' perspective, who is targeting championship or bust. Like they're not here to make up the numbers like, some of the teams who might have scraped into the eight who are thinking like, well, if we get lucky, we're going to run, sweet as, we're trying to win every game. But it's like, we know realistically we're not at that level. The Panthers are at that level. They set the standard for the entire rest of the NRL. But maybe this is not the worst time to, well, not the worst. So maybe this is the best time to catch them early on and really set a tone for a thing. Because if, I know I said that Warriors have nothing to lose, but they also, the flip side of that, maybe the better perspective of that to look at would be the other side of the coin, which is they have everything to gain. Because if you beat the Panthers, well, then you're straight into an elimination final, which would be a home game because they'd have won their qualifying first rounder. Imagine that, like at that point, if you make it to a preliminary final, you're competing for a title. Like it's that simple. If you get that far, particularly if you beat the Panthers to get there. So they're not there yet because there's the very big hurdle of having to win that game. But if they do, that's what's on the line. That's what they're playing for, right? So, and they will, like I say, they'll have to be at their best to do that. But we'll see. They've been prioritizing for it. I mean, in a funny way, the fact that they sent a injured backup player to the media stuff, it's kind of a statement of intent when you think about it. Like it's them saying we're fully focused on this game ahead. We're not having any distractions. We don't care about your media stuff. We're not worried about that. We're not going to put our best foot forward for the cameras. We're too busy on the training part. Whether that's true or not, like every other team is still focusing. But I guess the Warriors have to fly to Sydney to do that. So I'm assuming. So there is that other extra. It's a little bit more complicated to keep dudes in training, but it is a little bit of a statement of intent,
Well, Metcalf's from Sydney, so they gave him some time off. Just go do the media thing. It's all good.
Yeah, why not?
For the owner of Mindfulness every week in the podcast, you're doing a lot of like drifting off into the future. Like, just stay present. We got one game here. Who cares about what's coming up next and all the fantasy home finals and all that shit? Like, just be present, please. Just enjoy this moment. We got a finals game against the Panthers, and we'll see what happens after that. The Warriors, or let's just stay in the NRL quickly here and just roll through some of the other players, because I do want to touch on some junior stuff as well. Broncos versus Storm. Jesse Arthurs is starting on the wing, and you've got Jordan Ricky on the edge for the Broncos. Jesse Arthurs could be a sneaky Aotearoa Kiwis kind of Aotearoa A squad member of the Kiwis, maybe. Like he's good. He's good. And he's playing finals footy for the Broncos. East Coast Bays Junior in Auckland. Jordan Ricky, he might be a starting edge forward for the Kiwis. Like, there's a lot of depth in that position, but he will have a very interesting matchup against the Storm. Storm have Will Warbrick, Jerome Hughes, and Nelson Asafa-Solomona. Asafa-Solomona and Jerome Hughes, both from Wellington. Obviously, Jordan Ricky's from Christchurch. Hughes and Asafa-Solomona are certified Kiwis. William Warbrick, the depth on the wing for the Kiwis is immense, so I think he's more of an A winger, Aotearoa A winger, and we've got that game coming up, so we can track that. Sharks versus Roosters, Ronaldo Molitalo, Kiwis winger. Braden Hamlin-Uele has played one game for Samoa, one game for Aotearoa. I think he's capable of being a top 17 Aotearoa Kiwis forward with the current availability of players, injury, suspension. But he might opt for Samoa. That's all good. But if he's big in the finals, he will be in that Kiwis squad. Britton Nakora, he's another certified Kiwis player starting on the edge. The Roosters have some interesting stuff here. Fetalainga Ponga, formerly Junior Ponga, now Fetalainga Ponga. He is starting on the wing, and he's had a fantastic season after leaving the Tigers. He was in Queensland. He was in Queensland Cup. Shout out the Tigers under Michael Maguire. They recruited him to play NRL. Then he moves to the Roosters. Now he's a starting winger playing finals footy. He's fast and sneaky powerful for a pretty skinny lad. He's a Glenn Nora Jr. in Auckland from Kelston Boys. Joseph Manu starting centre. Brandon Smith is starting hooker for the Roosters. Brandon Smith's all good at passing. He's all good at running. He does a bit of kicking for the Roosters. He's had big minutes in recent games. Don't fall into this idea that Brandon Smith sucks at hooker for the Roosters. He's good. When he scoots out a dummy half, Sam Walker, or Luke Keary, or James Tedesco is usually there, creates points. And Siwa Wong is suddenly an 80-minute starting edge forward. This time last year, he's preparing for a World Cup, playing everything except NRL. In like his 6th or 7th game right now, he is a starting edge forward for the Roosters, and he is exceptional as well. Burn him, Manurewa Jr. Look out for Siwa Wong. The Newcastle Knights are taking on the Raiders, and the Knights have Greg Marzhew on the wing, Leo Thompson starting at prop. Greg Marzhew, given the Kiwis' depth at winger, I think Greg Marzhew is going to be a Samoan international, which could give Samoa Greg Marzhew, Paunga, Brian To'o, powerful wingers there. Leo Thompson is another, and I've said it all season, Matthew Tomoko, Leo Thompson are the two youngsters who I can see earning selection in the Kiwis squad who weren't there before. So Jordan Ricky has been in a Kiwis squad before. Griffin Neem has been in a Kiwis squad before. But this season, Leo Thompson and Matthew Tomoko have been incredibly consistent. So watch out for Leo Thompson, especially because Leo Thompson's coming up against Joseph Tapine from Wellington and Ata Mariota, who is a Manurewa Jr. from South Auckland, starting prop now for the Raiders, which is an incredible rise for Mariota. Matthew Tomoko starting centre for the Raiders as well. And also watch out for Phoenix Crossland, who was born in Wellington, but he moved to Australia as a youngster, a little baby. And he basically came up through the New South Wales system, and he has I think he's got an eligibility choice to make whether he wants to pursue the Australian origin pathway or play for the Kiwis, because he is starting hooker for the Knights and he's been very good as the hooker. And the Kiwis only have Brandon Smith right now as their hooker. I think Jeremy Marshall-King's out injured. Aaron Clark is out injured. So it's basically Brandon Smith and no one else. Phoenix Crossland could be a sneaky little lad to watch out for as far as Aotearoa Kiwis selection goes. But those are the matchups. Those are the Kiwi-NRL players that I'm interested in. And we also have finals in New South Wales and Queensland footy as well. The Warriors New South Wales Cup team, they are playing against the Raiders. And all the big Donnies are back for the New South Wales Cup team. So last week we had Ed Cosi, Ronald Volkman, Paul Roach, Keilani Going, Jacob Laban, Tom Ale in the NRL team. Now they are back in New South Wales Cup. You've also got Ali Leotawa starting centre. And you have Zion Mau's on the bench. So it's a very good, interesting New South Wales Cup team for the Warriors. And they've only got two SG Ball lads. Sorry, Tanner Stowers-Smith from Christchurch. He is starting prop. He played SG Ball. And Jacob Laban is also under 19 SG Ball eligible. But he didn't play many games. He's straight up a New South Wales Cup reserve grader. And shout out to Australian Rugby League and all their cute vibes. They always talk about how much they love New Zealand. Warriors, New South Wales Cup final. It's their home game. They're playing in Sydney. So we know how the Aussies love New Zealand and like to pretend that New Zealand doesn't exist. So shout out to them. Not much else doing in that. You do have like Josiah Karapani, East Tamaki Rugby Junior. He's starting centre for the Rabbitohs in New South Wales Cup, their finals game. And in Queensland Cup, you got Nicholas Halahilo. He was playing for the Warriors New South Wales Cup before a mid-season switch to the Central Coast Capras, and they are aligned with the Redcliffe Dolphins. So he might transition from Queensland Cup footy into the summer train and trial mix for the Dolphins. He is a starting edge forward for the Capras. And Vaka Sikahele, he's a Manurewa junior. He's starting on the bench for the Burleigh Bears. He's a very dynamic hooker, utility middle forward to watch out for. Junior footy, under 21s finals in New South Wales, the Sharks, they got Chris Vialia, Salisi Ata, Pawa Papuni Abbott is also in the Sharks squad. No Felix Fa'atili. I'd be interested to see if he pops up in that Sharks team, because his older brother, Kaius Fa'atili, is in the Wynnum Queensland Cup team for their finals game this weekend. Te Huranui Twiddle, starting fullback for the Eels. I talked about him in the variety show, I believe. And the Roosters, they've got Tavita Henare-Schuster, who is absolutely dominating under-21s and New South Wales Cup for the Roosters. Watch out for him. He is from Palmerston North, I believe. They've also got Salisi Faketi on the bench, who, along with Benaya Iowelu, has had stints in New South Wales Cup. So they are notable juniors in the Roosters system. And of course, we know that the Bulldogs suck. Townsville, they have two Kiwi-NRL juniors as their starting under-21 props. Jeremiah Matauti is from Otara, and Henry Tiutau is Maris Jr., and they are the starting props for their game this weekend. Brisbane Tigers have Samuela Vakadula, who is, I think he's a Bell Block Jr. in New Plymouth. I think so. And the Redcliffe Dolphins, under-21s, Taniela Otakulo, Otahuhu Jr., he is starting hooker, and Elijah Rasmussen has continued. I think he was playing Melmaninga Cup for the Dolphins. He's a Westlake Boys High School junior, and he is now coming off the bench for their under-21s team. So busy weekend of Kiwi-NRL Rugby League coming up in the NRL, New South Wales Cup, Queensland Cup, and under-21s in both states as well. I'll be on top of it. Hopefully get a few try scorers so we can get some clips and a few other bits and pieces as well. All of which will be packaged alongside UFC 293. That is happening in Sydney. And Israel Adesanya is headlining that card against Sean Strickland. Kai Kara France was meant to be on this card, but he had to pull out due to a concussion. You've got Justin Tuffer. He's from Avondale. He's on the card. You've got Carlos Ulberg, probably the second most impressive city kickboxing fighter right now. He's on the card. You've got Blood Diamond and Shane Young. They are on the card early on in the prelims. Blood Diamond and Shane Young need wins. They need wins in the UFC because they're on some losing streaks. Carlos Ulberg's on a little win streak. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because he is he's a notable city kickboxing fighter in the UFC, light heavyweight division. And he's someone who I can see the UFC promoting heavily as well. But the Adesanya versus Sean Strickland fight, it's a bit like the Panthers and the Warriors, to be honest. Like Sean Strickland, it's a little bit different because he doesn't have the similarities to Adesanya like the Warriors have the similarities to the Panthers, but Adesanya is the Panthers and Sean Strickland's the Warriors. Like, Sean Strickland really shouldn't win, but he might win, but he's not going to win because Adesanya is too good, too classy, too skillful, too dynamic, too experienced. Adesanya's just straight up better than Sean Strickland, and it's going to be, I don't know how Sean Strickland defeats Adesanya. Like, I'm predicting a win for Adesanya, and it's going to be very interesting just to see how this is all perceived, because it's another title defense for Adesanya after he won the rematch against Alex Pereira. Since then, Alex Pereira has gone up to the light heavyweight division. He defeated Jan Blachowicz in the same move that Adesanya made. Adesanya moved up the weight division and lost to Jan Blachowicz. So since Adesanya's win against Pereira, Pereira has already gone up a weight division and won the championship. Now Adesanya is defending his middleweight belt against Sean Strickland. And yeah, no idea what's going to happen, but I think Adesanya will win and notch up another title defense in the middleweight division.
Which at some point he's going to have to start like breaking records for title defenses. I know it's not consecutive because he did have the loss to Pereira, and then he dropped him in the rematch, and now I guess that means we're just back where we were before that, where it's just like Israel Adesanya looking for, just bring it, who can challenge him kind of thing. Like, who's the next man up to lose to this dude? Because that's just kind of how he's been operating for a while. And it does feel like Strickland is back in, at least from what you're saying, they're back in that sort of mold. Whereas like Pereira was a little bit of they had kickboxing history. The dude is a bit bigger, as you can see from jumping up to light heavyweight, isn't it? And yet he was a little bit more of an outsider thing. He was rushed through the division, I think, to get to a title challenge quicker than others might have, because they knew he had something different, and it was a marketable match, and it was worth it too, because he had the Pereira win the first time round, then you had the Adesanya response. But this feels a little bit more like is he going back to what he was doing before that, of just like, next up, who wants to lose next time? But yeah, we'll see how it goes. You never want to count your chickens before the eggs have hatched.
It is an interesting dynamic in the middleweight division, though, because Robert Whittaker lost to Dricus du Plessis. And it's a bit tricky because old Dricus du Plessis, he's from South Africa. He's a Pakeha Palangi African, and he had the whole situation of who's the real African between him and Adesanya. That was the situation. But Dricus du Plessis, he couldn't, like, this fight was only made a month ago or something like that.
Because it was supposed to be du Plessis, wasn't it? Because they'd even done like someone had like, was it him went into the ring for Adesanya's last fight, or was it the other way around?
Like it wasn't supposed to be anyone. It wasn't supposed to be anyone. It was just like they didn't have the fight.
Right.
They did have a face-off, and they had their situation about who's the real African and stuff like that, but that didn't mean anything for who's the next fight. But du Plessis, he couldn't turn around in the time frame. Like, it was only a month or so. It's a bit unrealistic to expect him to back up that quickly. And so instead of the battle of the real Africans, now Adesanya is fighting Sean Strickland, and Sean Strickland's got a bit of a history as like a neo-Nazi type of character. So it's a weird dynamic, and I'm interested to see what happens. I'm interested to see how Adesanya performs, but also how the whole interaction, because anytime the UFC comes to Australia and New Zealand, it's a sellout. This event was sold out before the main event was announced. So it's always a big deal when the UFC comes to this part of the world. And Adesanya is basically the biggest star in the UFC alongside Sean O'Malley at the moment. So I'm just curious. I don't know too much about it. I'm just curious, and I'll be tracking, obviously, Carlos Ulberg, Blood Diamond, Justin Tafa, and Shane Young as well. The Blackcaps, they have finished their T20 series against England. Meanwhile, the New Zealand A team is continuing their second game against Australia A. Oh, Tom Bruce hit a century. Bowlers like New Zealand A is in a good position once again against Australia A. And we covered this on the subscriber podcast. New Zealand A has 2 victories and a draw this year against Australia A. So if you're a hater of New Zealand cricket, if you think the Blackcaps suck and they should be like, what's going on? All the narratives that we observed last summer as the test situation was happening against England, and they were selecting old players, and where's all the young players for the Blackcaps? Why do the Blackcaps suck? Rah, 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 rah. Well, New Zealand A has 2 victories and a draw in 3 games against Australia A. So let's just chill out. I think Kiwi cricket's doing all right. as far as the Blackcaps versus England go, now they move into an ODI series, and the best bowler, Ishodi, he's not in the ODI squad. His spin overs are likely to go to Rachin Ravindra. So that's a sneaky little thing to watch out for, how Rachin Ravindra performs. Trent Bolter's back in the squad. But one key player that we talked about in the subscriber podcast was Glenn Phillips, and he finishes the best batter for the Blackcaps in the series. 174 runs. Next best was Finn Allen on 123 runs. And you had Glenn Phillips scoring his 174 runs at a strike rate of 153, which is bonkers. I'm still incredibly intrigued about Glenn Phillips moving into ODI cricket because, as we said on the subscriber podcast, far less experience in the one-day format for the Blackcaps. Whether it's Glenn Phillips or whether you've got some other observations, what tickles your antenna from that Blackcaps T20 series moving into the ODIs?
Well, I'm just checking something because when they announced that Kane Williamson was going to be in the World Cup squad, so they picked one player for the 15 before they picked the rest of the 15. They also announced that they're gonna announce the squad, like the full squad, at East Sodi's old high school, which I realize now the reason they picked East Sodi, because we joked about this off thing for the last one, because when they named the T20 World Cup squad, I think they went to Martin Guptill's high school and then didn't pick Martin Guptill. So it seems like a bad omen. I'm realizing that's probably the reason they picked East Sodi, is because he will actually be in the country when they announce the squad, whereas everyone else will still be over in England, or I think they're going to Bangladesh, I think. Not a full squad, but close to a full squad. I think has some games in Bangladesh as well. At least the guys who need the games anyway. So I think Trent Bolt was there, and
for those who don't remember, Martin Guptill, the T20 World Cup squad was announced at his old school, Avondale College. Martin Guptill was the incumbent opener for the white ball team. Big announcement, lots of buzz around Martin Guptill. Doesn't play. So shout out to the Blackcaps and shout out to Martin Guptill. But observation from the series.
Glenn Phillips.
What about
like it's not just the destructiveness, but also like the consistency of it is what was so impressive. It's just like when you run through his scores, he's getting 20 to 40 plus every, like as a minimum across these games. And he was scoring runs in the warm-up games beforehand. He seems to be in some pretty nice touch, which is very important because he's likely to have quite an important role in the ODI squad at the World Cup, which is also likely to mimic his T20 batting more so than it is for pretty much anyone else in the squad, because he's probably going to have to be the dude who comes in and does what Jimmy Neesham used to do as the closer later in innings. The last 10 overs, that's for Glenn Phillips, especially now that Kane Williamson is in there, because that means there's less likelihood of Phillips needing to bat higher up the order. And if you lose a few wickets, he's easily good enough to cover that, no dramas. But his main role, I guess, with the bat is probably going to be the guy who can hit some sixes at the end of the innings. And he can hit some sixes at the end of the innings. That's not a worry. He's been doing it nicely against a pretty good England bowling attack too. And it was a funky old series where they got thrashed in 2 games and then they thrashed them in 2 games. Like there were no close games. So the 2 games into the series, it looked like the Blackcaps are in a disaster until you step back and realize, well, it's only T20, it's a warm-up, and these things fluctuate heaps. And yeah, they fluctuated back the other way for the Blackcaps in the last couple. And Glenn Phillips, big part of that. An informed Glenn Phillips is a very, very, very good thing for the Blackcaps.
And the series played out how we expect Blackcaps cricket to play out. They usually start slow because they're just sussing out information, they're just figuring it out, and they always build into tournaments or the series. And you're always going to see it. It's the same with the Warriors, I reckon, where it's like Warriors, they're struggling first 15 minutes. Dylan Walker comes on, changes the whole style of footy. Blackcaps lose the first game, all the headlines, like some of the headlines you see from the England series just gone, oh, they got a hiding, England blast away the Blackcaps. So it's like, there's 4 games to play. What do you know? Last 2 games, Blackcaps win. So I'd like to see everyone chill out and because we have noted how the Blackcaps operate. They just figure it out throughout the tournament. They figure it out throughout this series. They build their way in. They get the information. They do the research, and they do the mahi to improve over the course of series and fixtures. Shout out to Neil Wagner as well. He's playing for county cricket. He took 2 wickets. No wickets in the first innings and 2 wickets in the second innings. Somerset was smoked by Hampshire. So shout out to Neil Wagner. And I'll throw out like the ODIs against England. Will Young's in the squad. I think that's going to be an interesting series for Will Young because I've got him in the World Cup squad. And I've got him in the World Cup squad ahead of Henry Nicholls. But it could be a bit of a shootout to see who gets more runs out of those two. As I said, Rachin Ravindra is going to be operating as the second spinner in the series. And this is a fantastic seam unit. Trent Boult, Matt Henry, Adam Milne, Tim Southey, Kyle Jamieson, Lockie Ferguson. That's what we want to see. So is there another player or someone who you're intrigued about for the ODIs coming up against England?
I mean, the return of Trent Boult is pretty cool. And we're going to get a nice little run of Trent Boult playing some ODI cricket. I'm not sure where he is, like, statistically in terms of wickets for the Blackcaps, but I do think he's nearing on that 200 ODI wicket mark, which is a nice little milestone that he will surely surpass over the next couple of months. And we don't know, but could be the last extended stretch we have of him in a Blackcaps jersey, so it's at least something to savor throughout this little journey. Yeah, I don't know. There might not be room for Henry Nicholls or Will Young in the ODI squad now that Williamson's available, but there's certainly not room for both of them. So I like that you highlighted that particular little head-to-head, little mano a mano, because this is maybe the last chance. I would imagine that they're probably sorted on their squad already, knowing the Blackcaps. But if there is still room to adjust expectations, this is the last chance. Other than that, I'm going to say Daryl Mitchell. I think Daryl Mitchell is a dude to keep an eye out a little bit in terms of does he get any overs with the ball, because I do think that's an element that is something that has been, well, I think everyone knows he's been under-bowled internationally, particularly in the shorter formats where he's got a little bit of certainly in domestic level, got a nice history of being able to pick up some nice tidy runs and bowl in the death, which is something that they don't have a lot of, particularly if Jimmy Neesham doesn't play. But also, I mean, if Glenn Phillips is the closer, he's probably batting at 6. Daryl Mitchell's in the top 5. Daryl Mitchell absolutely deserves to be batting either 4 or 5 for the Blackcaps. He's also got a decent record playing in England against England in various formats. So that's a nice little confidence booster for him. But I think he's another one who the Blackcaps quite need him to be a good, nice middle order force. So he's someone who, if he gets a few nice runs the way that Phillips did through the T20 series, that would be a pretty timely boost as well.
This just sounds lovely. Will Young, ODI batting average 49.3. Devon Conway, ODI batting average 45.8. Daryl Mitchell, ODI batting average 43.6. That's pretty good. Sprinkle in Fennellan, Glenn Phillips, and obviously Tom Latham does it all. So none of them are in the World Cup squad just yet. We've only got one bloke in the World Cup squad, Kane Williamson, one-man team. That's all we need. Big up to him. Foosball. We've got a couple of things to discuss here with regards to Kiwi football. Every week, it seems like some new Kiwi football is doing something crazy. And I learn about this through your clips and information that you put out on Twitter, X, Instagram, and everywhere else. This week, we had Jamie Searle making some great saves for Forest Glen. Is that it?
Forest Green Rovers.
Forest Green, Glen Green, same English idea. Forest Green Rovers, some great saves. So shout out to Jamie Searle. However, that's nothing new for the last few months. Because over the last few months, we've talked about the All Whites goalie depth, and we've had Zach Jones making some great saves, Max Crocombe, we've had Nick Zarnev. Alex Paulson, someone to watch out for in the Wellington Phoenix setup, and Ollie Sale in the A-League as well. So I listed 6 goalies, at least 3 of whom have been doing some highlight-worthy things overseas. How are you assessing that Jamie Searle specifically, but then flowing into that All Whites Flying Kiwis kind of goalkeeping situation?
Yeah, well, the All Whites don't have a game in this current. There's an international window that's going on right now. They don't have a game now, but they do have a game in the next window. I think it's Ireland, unless that's the window after. But anyway, they'll supposed to be playing in like that'll be 6 weeks or something like that. And I do think that goalkeeping, certainly the goalkeeping kind of depth chart, like it's a little bit open in terms of who's the starter because it was Stefan Marinovic for quite a while. Didn't mention Stefan Marinovic in that list. You know why? Because he hasn't had a club since the start of the year. Like he's just not been playing professional football. So if you're not playing, you're not in the mix. Like Winston Reid is the only person with the I don't know the level of mana to be able to still get picked as a full-time international footballer. And even then, that was a short-term thing at the end of a World Cup cycle. Like that didn't last beyond that. He's now retired. Although not officially retired from club duty, I will say. I don't know what he's actually going to do though. I haven't heard anything from him since. But
Wellington Phoenix need a centre back.
They could use one, but he's living the sunny life in Dubai these days, so he's maybe more likely to end up playing with Cristiano Ronaldo or something in the Saudi league, or who knows. Anyway, so the incumbent goalkeeper from the previous World Cup cycle is out of the picture right now. Ollie Sale had a nice little run there, but questionable form in his last season with the Phoenix, which was below the level that he's capable of, obviously, because the couple of seasons before that he was very good. But also, I think maybe somewhere in between is his usual level, and he's not necessarily commanding the full-time starters gig. Like he didn't really have a game or two with in their All Whites. Like a lot of his appearances, he's only made about 10 appearances, and a lot of them were against the OFC teams in qualifying, and like he hasn't quite hammered home that status. Therefore, Max Crocombe gets a go, I think, in the Qatar game that got abandoned. So it looks like maybe and he might have played, I think Crocombe might have played against Sweden before that as well. So it's starting to look like Crocombe is nudged ahead in the number one gig. But it's not just the number one. It's also like you pick 3 goalkeepers in a traveling squad, and there's at least 6 options competing. And that's without looking at a younger dude like, say, Case Sims or, there's a or Marinovic comes back into the picture. Who knows? Like, there's a lot of goalkeeping depth at the moment. I will say maybe not superstar, no doubter doing things like some of the outfielders are doing at the moment level, which is why it is a debate, but it's good depth. It's nice. And these dudes, not all of them are starting goalkeepers for their clubs. Like Jamie Searle certainly hasn't been. He's at an interesting time of it. He's from the Waikato region. He went over to play for the academy for, I think it was Aston Villa the first year he went to England. Then the second year he moved to Swansea. I think he stayed at Swansea for 2 years. Again, playing youth team football. Then he moved to play first team football with, so I was going to say Brentford, but it's not them. It's one of the other ones, like Barnsley, I think it was. So he was with Barnsley, played a couple, I think 2 appearances in the first team, sat on the bench a few times, but he was sort of the third string goalkeeper for them. Then this year he moves to Forest Green Rovers, where he's now the second string goalkeeper. So he's been making a few transfers. He's been through a few different clubs, but he's also sort of like, with each transfer, he's stepped up his career a little bit. He's gone from like, under 18s done to 21s or whatever it is, and then to first team football as a third choice, then to first team football as a second choice. So these saves that he was making that were in the highlight clip were from the EFL Trophy, which is the lower league cup competition, starts with the group stage and then goes into knockouts. Ben Wayne's team actually made the final of it last year. He did score in one of the group games, actually, Ben Wayne. So this was an opportunity for a few reserves. This is Searle's chance. He also played in a League Cup game, I think, for them earlier on in the season. and did actually make a mistake in that one. It wasn't amazing, but he was absolutely brilliant in the second game here. Similar deal to where Niksanev's doing. Like, he had been first choice goalkeeper for AFC Wimbledon a lot. Then this year he's not. He's the backup. Played absolutely brilliantly in the first League Cup game that he got an opportunity in, which earned them a chance to play Chelsea in the next round. And then they picked the other goalie for the Chelsea game, which was quite rude of them. But then he had a very good game in the EFL Trophy as well. He saved a penalty in the shootout as they got a bonus point there. Max Crocombe started the season as a backup for Burton Albion. And then the other guy who was playing ahead of him, who was actually an ex-Chelsea sort of prospect who never made it at Chelsea. They were both new signings for some reason. The other guy's getting the games ahead of Crocombe, but the other guy plays crap, concedes a bunch of goals, then gets injured. Crocombe comes in, is fantastic for a couple games. The other guy comes back from injury. He's stuck on the bench behind Crocombe, so Crocombe's earned those gigs. There's, I mean, it's again, like, it's not, these guys aren't at the Premier League. These are League One, League Two kind of levels in England. But every one of them, when they've been opportunities, they've played well. And I think especially with goalkeepers, the level matters maybe a little bit less. Like, a striker scoring a bunch of goals in League Two doesn't compare to scoring goals in the Premier League. I think with goalkeepers, it's just the movement is a bit more restricted. The opportunities are more restricted. It's sort of like a dude at that level playing very well could translate higher a little bit more. So we'll see. It's going to be a funky one when Darren Baisley gets to pick his first all-white squad as the permanent manager. He's got some goalkeeping things to figure out. There's a lot of good goalies there.
We've also got the Cup finals happening this weekend. Just pick out a few different key topics, not like respect to the teams. They're all competing. Can they win? Can they not? But my interest in domestic football is always forecasting some players, highlighting some players or key trends in the domestic football landscape. Who are you watching out for in these cup finals? Obviously, Chatham Cup and Kate Sheppard Cup for the women, because this is where the best footballers that enter the Flying Kiwis realms come from. So who's a couple of individuals in the Chatham Cup and a couple of individuals in the Kate Sheppard Cup who you are interested in? And also that flows into National League. So if we can identify some talent here for the Cup finals, then we can learn about them more in the National League as well.
Yeah, the Kate Sheppard Cup finals between Wellington United and Western Springs. So both of them will sort of be National League clubs. Western Springs qualified for National League. Wellington United don't. The capital region don't have automatic qualification, but they're trying to build towards it. So there's two capital teams this year instead of just one. And they've Capital Football have kind of said that basically Wellington United's going to control one of those teams, and the champions of the Cap Prem, Karori, going to control one of the other teams. So I expect they'll be able to bring in players from other clubs who aren't of those two, but you'll see mostly the basis of those two Capital Prem teams will be reflecting those two clubs. So effectively, Wellington United are also in the National League in a sort of roundabout way. Definitely with those two clubs, though, it's hard to pick players because I need to see the cup final in order to learn about them, because those games are not visible. You know, they're not streaming very many women's club games during the winter season, so I haven't really seen a lot of them. But I know a lot of those Wellington United players will have played for Capital last year in the National League. There'll be a few names to recognise there once I see a team list and have an idea. And Western Springs certainly. They did lose a few players from last year's National League stint, but you got some, like Sofia Garcia will be there, American forward who's very, very quick and direct and scores a lot of goals. And like Lily Jervis at the back. They've got some, particularly out wide, you'll see a few players who have been playing in age grade tournaments. I think also a name who's popped up playing the I think is going to the under-16s with New Zealand. So I assume she was probably just another American import. Her name is Ella Jerez, but she's in the New Zealand squad for the under-16 Oceania Championships that are coming up in a couple of weeks. So there's a name to watch automatically. Definitely I'll do some cross referencing between recent national age grade squads with the what do you call it, with the like these squads that are involved in for the email probably tomorrow. For the men's competition, you've got Melville United, who didn't make the National League. Were in the National League last year, though. Didn't qualify this year, but they have. So this is like their whole season on the line. They're up against Christchurch United, who have been winning absolutely everything in the South Island. They won the South Island title again. All three of the regional leagues had repeat winners, by the way. Auckland City, Wellington, Olympic also winning titles. Christchurch United hadn't lost a game until last week. They last week lost to Kashmir Technical in the last game of the season, having already wrapped up the title with a cup final the week after. So I suspect they probably rested a couple of players, or at least their mind was on the game ahead. But they're looking to win a Chatham Cup, and you're starting to see, like, because Christchurch United, right? The story with them is there's a Russian fella who owns them called Slava Main, who's very rich, like very, very, very wealthy man. He's put a lot of money into that club, but not just into the first team. It's not just one of those things like chasing glory with the first team, signing all the best players from around the region. They've really put a lot of money into their academy, and they're trying to set up like you can't say the South Island's version of the Wellington Phoenix Academy because they don't have an A-League pathway like the Phoenix do, but it's certainly the biggest sort of production line in the South Island these days. We have seen quite a few, increasingly so as well. Whenever a national age grade squad is named now, you're seeing a couple of Christchurch United players in there, which didn't used to be the case. So it's beginning to really show some dividends now. You'll see a few of those guys, I'm sure. In the cup final, again, I'll cross-reference some of them, but some dudes I think one dude in particular, if I'm picking someone from Christchurch United, is have a little peek at Sam Phillip up front, who is an ex-Wellington Phoenix dude, went to some United States stuff, so he's probably early 20s, I'd say. And he was a Golden Boot winner for the Southern League. He's come back this year, scored bundles and bundles and bundles of goals for the Rams, and he'll be a very tough one to contain for Melville, who also have one of the best rates of picking young players as well. I haven't seen enough of the dudes that they're like current sort of crop, but I do know they're sort of best players from last year. You had like Josh Galletley and Ollie Kalotti was playing. Ollie Kalotti actually was Christchurch United, and then also Melville. He played for both of them, but is now at Auckland City. So there's they lost a few of their best younger dudes from last year, and have still had one of the best rates of sort of youth players in the first team throughout the Northern League this season. So Melville's just got this ongoing thing, but I think the story with them is, even though there is very much like a youth focus you can see in Melville, and they're producing very good players. And both of these teams doing that from outside this typical Auckland Wellington kind of dynamic of where most of the players are coming from, which is beautiful to see. You want to spread that around as much as possible. I think also, though, the story for Melville is probably about, he's 38-year-old now, Aaron Scott, who is their inspirational captain. He's played for the All Whites, National League legend going back many years. Last game of football before he retires, and it's a cup final, and Melville's going to have good traveling support. For some reason, the game's in Auckland, but even though it's between a Hamilton club and a Christchurch club, but yeah, the farewell for Aaron Scott is certainly going to be that's certainly going to be a rowdy one, especially if they win. Although I will say, Christchurch United should be favourites there.
Where do you rank that Christchurch kind of production line amongst the context of Kiwi football?
It's a good question. It's not the Phoenix. It's trying to compete with Ole Academy, I would say. I think Ole Academy's backlog gives them more of a thing, but in terms of the current strengths of them, there's not much difference. Ole isn't, they haven't had a McCoward or a Staminich for a couple of years. There are Auckland City don't put as much effort into youth things, but they do bring through a few. Auckland United is a club that's put in a bit of an emphasis. But I'd say, as far as clubs go, I don't know that many clubs are operating who don't have that professional thing like the Phoenix. I don't know that many club or all being private academies, even though this is sort of an example of a private academy from a club. I don't know that there's any club that would. I think Christchurch United certainly would claim to hold their own against anyone across the country of a comparable status.
Beauty. That is the Niche Cast for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Big up. Enjoy all the sport. Lots of fantastic sport happening.
So much.
So love yourself, and we'll be back next week with more podcasts. You can watch this on YouTube. You can check it on the podcast platforms, and make sure you check out our website and newsletter as well. Big up yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chur, chur.